our headlines on this Thursday afternoon, September 8th. The cities of Pohang and Gyeongju have been designated as special disaster zones in the wake of Typhoon Hinnamnor, making them eligible for tangible state relief support. Finance Minister Chuseok says spending to support the country's vulnerable groups will surge by over 13% next year to ease their cost of living amid raging inflation. And Seoul and Washington have agreed to open an engagement channel assigned with the task of addressing the exclusion of tax credits for electric vehicles assembled outside of North America. The cities of Pohang and Gyeongju have been designated as special disaster zones. The designation came Wednesday after President Yoon made his way to the southern coastal region to witness firsthand the aftermath of Typhoon Hinnamnor. As special disaster zones, those hard hit by the typhoon in the two cities will be eligible for relief funds. Their health insurance and utility bills will also be partially covered. The government will also foot between 50% and 80% of the bill to restore public and private facilities. More regions may be designated as special disaster zones following relevant assessment by authorities. Up next, our presidential office correspondent Yoon covers the president's remarks while in the southern part of the country back on Wednesday to pledge support in person. To take a listen.
President Yoon arrived in Pohang, roughly 270 kilometers southeast of Seoul, Wednesday to get a first-hand look at the devastation left behind by Typhoon Hinnamnor. His first stop, an apartment complex where 7 people died in a flooded underground parking lot. Meeting residents there, some voicing out loud their complaints, the president promised speedy recovery and vowed to grant the city a special disaster zone status, which would free up financial aid and relief funds for the region. At least 11 deaths are blamed on the typhoon in the nation's south, and those in parts of the hardest hit Pohang are without power, water, and shelter.
제가 아주 신속하게 전기 쓰실 수 있도록 제가 최선 다하고요. 현장 확인을 한번 해보고 듣기만 할 것이 아니라 제가 눈으로 보고 그래서 할 거니까 걱정하지 마세요.
To help recovery efforts, the Yoon administration approved a $36 million relief fund during a cabinet meeting earlier in the day.
정부는 국민의 생명과 재산을 지키는 일에 무한 책임을 진다는 각오로 끝까지 긴장의 끈을 놓지 않을 것입니다. 모든 국민들께서 완전한 일상 회복에 이를 때까지 제가 직접 모든 상황을 챙기겠습니다.
윤정민, Arirang News.
And President Yoon is scheduled to sit down with U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris here in Seoul on September 29th for talks on issues of mutual concern, including North Korea. Now, this is according to the top office here on this Thursday. Harris's visit follows U.S. President Joe Biden's trip to Seoul back in May, and it's the first time in more than 4 years for a U.S. Vice President to make an official trip to South Korea. The White House has also confirmed her trips to Seoul and neighboring Japan, where Harris will be leading Biden's delegation to the state funeral of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
Together with my legislative colleagues.
And in Washington, D.C., top trade officials representing the Yoon and Biden administrations are reportedly committed to opening an engagement channel to address Seoul's concerns over the exclusion of tax credits for electric vehicles assembled outside of North America. Our Foreign Ministry correspondent Kim Dami reports.
Seoul and Washington have agreed to launch ministerial talks on ways to minimize the impact of the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act on South Korea's electric vehicle industry. The agreement was made during a meeting between South Korea's Trade Minister An Deok-geun and U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai in Washington on Wednesday.
Since we've decided to form a bilateral consultative body with the USTR today and start specific discussions on this, we will continue to discuss as many alternatives as possible.
According to An, the U.S. side fully understands the severity of the issue. Tai's office also stated that she had listened closely to South Korea's concerns and that the two sides were committed to opening an engagement channel on the matter. But actual room for the Biden administrations to take action appears to be limited, as the conditions for EV subsidies are explicitly stipulated in the bill. In fact, in order for the bill to be amended or even for enforcement to be delayed for 2 to 3 years, there needs to be approval from both the Senate and House of Representatives. While specific dates are yet to be set up, An plans to meet Thai again both next week and the week after that. The IRA excludes EVs assembled outside of North America from benefiting from a $7,500 federal tax break. South Korea believes the bill also violates the Korea-US Free Trade Agreement, which requires both countries to treat exports from each other the same as domestic goods. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Back on the local front, Vice Defense Ministers from Seoul and Tokyo have addressed the importance of security collaboration. The exchange took place on the sidelines of an annual security forum here in the capital city. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Peun-ji has details.
The Vice Defense Ministers of South Korea and Japan have discussed ways to strengthen defense cooperation between the two countries. Shin Bum-cheol and Masami Oka on Wednesday held the first Seoul-Tokyo Defense Bilateral in 6 years, on the sidelines of this year's Seoul Defense Dialogue. As Seoul's Vice Defense Minister Shin Bum-cheol left the closed-door meeting, he said there were talks about the need to settle the bilateral dispute that worsened after a Japanese maritime patrol aircraft flew at low altitude over a South Korean warship in late 2018.
Regarding the issue of the patrol aircraft in 2018, both sides agreed that we need to resolve this matter to enhance defense cooperation between our two countries, and we decided to carry out additional working-level discussions.
During the event, there were also talks on ways to achieve complete denuclearization of North Korea. South Korea's Defense Minister Lee Jong-sub said North Korea will benefit greatly if they choose to take a new path and give up their nuclear weapons.
The South Korean government has been trying to change North Korea by offering the audacious initiative to the regime, which promises great support for its economy and society if Pyongyang stops developing nuclear weapons and takes practical steps towards denuclearization.
Japan's senior defense official also expressed concerns about the North's growing nuclear and missile threats, saying that they pose grave and imminent threats to the security of Japan and its allies.
We welcome the new administration's policy as we believe it is consistent with our goal of denuclearization of North Korea. Close cooperation between Japan, Republic of Korea, and the United States is of critical importance in addressing security threats posed by North Korea.
This year's Seoul Defense Dialogue brought together defense officials from more than 50 different countries around the world and will run until Thursday. Peun-ji, Arirang News.
Following trilateral security talks in Hawaii last week, top nuclear envoys from South Korea, the US and Japan met in Tokyo on Wednesday to follow up on North Korea-related matters. Our Unification Ministry, that is, correspondent Han Sung-woo has more.
Seoul's top nuclear envoy, Kim Gun, had trilateral talks on North Korea with his American counterpart, Sung Kim, and Japan's Takehiro Funakoshi in Tokyo, with the three voiced concerns regarding Pyongyang's nuclear weapons program. On Wednesday at Japan's foreign ministry, Sung Kim pointed out that the regime's numerous ballistic missile tests are escalating military tensions and threatening the safety of all countries in the region. He added that the U.S. has reason to believe the North has been preparing for its seventh nuclear test, something the country fears will harm the global nuclear non-proliferation regime, and said the complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula is its goal. Sung Kim noted, however, that Washington is working to bring Pyongyang back to the negotiating table, saying the U.S. is ready to talk with North Korea without any preconditions. Kim Gun stressed that any provocations from the North will be met with a swift and resolute response, but also left the doors open for dialogue, bringing up South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's so-called audacious initiative of providing the North with economic aid in return for real steps toward denuclearization, a plan that will continue to be discussed among the three nations moving forward. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
On the pandemic front, health authorities have announced 72,646 new COVID-19 infections on this Thursday. Now, that's a drop of close to 13,000 from the day prior. Regardless of this reality, though, 64 additional patients lost their lives to the virus over the past 24 hours, while the number of critical cases hovers slightly below 500. Pundits believe the country is past the peak of its latest wave, driven by Omicron. In related news, screening sites and COVID-19 care centres will be open throughout the 4-day Chuseok holiday that begins tomorrow, Friday, to ensure a safe celebration. Here's our Gyeongju.
South Korea is raising its guard against COVID-19 ahead of the upcoming Chuseok holiday. Mass migration is expected nationwide during the 4-day holiday, with millions traveling to see relatives. To prevent the virus from spreading further, health officials on Wednesday laid out tailored virus prevention measures.
We have made it possible to quickly and easily receive COVID-19 tests nationwide. Public health centers, screening centers, and temporary screening centers are also open during the holidays.
The KDCA said that COVID-19 testing will be temporarily possible at highway rest stops across the country for 4 days starting from Friday, when the Chuseok holiday begins. 9 of the busiest rest stops were selected. The Seoul-bound section of the Ansong services, as well as the Hinnamnor-bound Icheon services, will be among them that have temporary COVID-19 testing stations. The KDCA also says a total of 6,000 one-stop COVID-19 treatment centers will be operational nationwide throughout the holiday. At least 700 will also be open on Saturday, the day of Chuseok. People will be able to be tested, receive in-person medical attention, and get a prescription at these centers. For regions without these one-stop treatment centers, public health centers and emergency rooms will be able to prescribe antiviral drugs. Some 3,500 pharmacies across the country will be open on Saturday. The government will secure over 4,000 sick beds for those considered as being at high risk, such as children, expectant mothers, and dialysis patients, and create a task force to monitor the health of vulnerable people, such as seniors living alone. Medical consultation centers offering non-face-to-face treatment will run around the clock.
The government will operate an emergency response system during the holiday period, continue to monitor the current situation, and prepare thoroughly.
Gyeongju, Arirang News.
And that wraps up the first half of the Daily Report. In the second half, we continue our coverage of COVID-19 containment efforts amid this year's Chuseok celebrations. Do stay with us. We return soon.
South Korea's experience in tackling COVID-19 and introduced a Korean New Year. A Korean survivor of Japan's wartime slavery met with
extraordinary climate crisis and pledged to work with the EU to tackle the challenge.
The objective of its North Korea policy is
protesters gathering across the country to peacefully demand an end to hate and violence.
Arirang, what matters?
so good right now. Maybe I had a drink or two, but this somehow feels like it's forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good right now. Maybe this is forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good right now. Forever.
Welcome back. South Korea is looking ahead to a long weekend starting tomorrow, that is Friday, as we celebrate this year's Chuseok. Accordingly, on Viewpoint today, we address efforts to ensure a safe holiday amid the ongoing pandemic. For more, I have Professor Kim Moon-gyu from Yonsei University. Professor Kim, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I also have Dr. Kim Seung-taek from Institute Pasteur Korea. Dr. Kim, it's good to see you again.
Good afternoon.
Professor Kim, this is the first Chuseok in the absence of most COVID-19 restrictions amid the pandemic, but there are concerns that the daily tally may spike after the 4-day holiday. Do you share these concerns?
Usually, after the long weekend like Chuseok or the New Year's Day, we have a mild increase of cases. And I'd like to quote from a famous historian, Arnold Toynbee. He said that human history is a history of challenge and response. So if I substitute this quote into our situation right now, I would say it's a fight against BA.5 of Omicron against humans' reaction, people's reaction. So BA.5 is very highly contagious, but doesn't cause so much severe cases. And that's not the only thing we have to mention. The other one is the people's reaction. And I would like to say avoid 3 C's. So the first C is avoid a confined place, and avoid very crowded place, and avoid close contact. So I wish that people will remember as this. And well, we have to go back to the basic. The personal hygiene is the most important thing. Even though our government will ease the quarantine measures, there are some people who need to be very careful, the elderly and the person with underlying conditions. So I wish that everybody will be safe through this Chuseok holiday. And I do believe that the daily tally will rise a little bit, but eventually it will decline.
Right, hopefully, of course. Yes. And speaking about the daily tally, Dr. Kim, it appears as though Korea is past the peak of this latest wave ahead as we look ahead to Chuseok. Do you agree?
Yes, and all the numbers and stats are actually indicating that we are in the some declining just the phase of COVID-19. But then, as Dr. Kim, Professor Kim said, after maybe Chuseok holidays, just people just get together. I mean, from many differences. So then, just sharing foods, and after just a long talk, there is some chance of just a spike after that Chuseok holidays. And in the future, we have to somehow expect this COVID-19, this infection will just going up and down, and that probably depending on the maybe from future or emerging just variant, also some our just immune status. But then the best thing at this moment is that we have to just keep the vulnerable people, like some elderly people and the immune compromised people.
Right. And Professor Kim, we have been told that a total of 6,000 COVID-19 care centres will be open during the 4-day holiday that we're looking ahead to. Could you tell us a bit more about the role of these centres and what people can expect from visiting them?
Yes, already there are many centres, but especially through this Chuseok holidays, there will be a screening centre at the highway rest stops and areas even affected by this big typhoon. And number one priority is let the patient with underlying conditions or elderly have a quick diagnosis, and they should have an access to medication such as Paxlovid without delay. And usually we have to start the medication within 5 days of the onset of the symptoms. But if you keep on screening with the rapid antigen test, you might have a false negative result. So I recommend that people in age more than 65 or people with underlying condition, they should rely on PCR results. And detailed information is on the website, so you have to search the website if you need some information.
Right, I see. And Dr. Kim, for those planning to travel during the Chuseok holiday, which we heard in our news segment, more than 30 million Koreans are expected to hit the road. What are some emergency medications that people can take with them in the event of COVID-19 symptoms while on the road?
Well, there are actually very effective drugs against the some COVID-19, including just Paxlovid and then some remdesivir and then molnupiravir and then some monoclonal antibody, which is actually not available in Korea right now. But then there are some like Paxlovid and the molnupiravir is orally available drugs. But the thing is that these drugs are only available after prescription and then also just after confirming the COVID-19. So this cannot be something that we need some sort of just emergency cases on the road. So that what we would just recommend is that maybe you can just carry some the drugs for some common cold. That actually somehow just relieves the symptoms that we actually may just experience after COVID-19. But other than that, maybe just testing as soon as possible and getting just a prescription is just the best way. And also, if we just plan ahead, maybe now it is just a little bit late, but if we can just plan ahead, maybe just being vaccinated is maybe just the best option we can take. For example, like at least 1 or 2 weeks before departure.
Right. And Professor Kim, this may sound like a random question, but on the subject of emergency medication, there has been quite a bit of talk about ginger and its alleged benefits against COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic. Is there any truth to this belief?
Well, there are many remedies for COVID-19, and I would like to categorize into two. One is specific, and the other one is non-specific. And as we all know that COVID-19 causes huge inflammation, any remedies that was believed to cause anti-inflammatory or antioxidative effects, they were on the table to discuss about. So usually vitamin D, vitamin C, or zinc, those kind of things are considered as a non-specific remedies, even not only for COVID-19, for other kinds of common flu or infections. Before diagnosis of COVID-19, you can have whatever you want, ginger or those
vitamin C or
whatever I mentioned. But as it follows the personal preference. But since you considering a possibility of COVID-19, you better have an accurate diagnosis. And once you are diagnosed, and if the doctors consider for specific treatments, just as Dr. Kim mentioned, you have to put the priority on those specific treatments. And if you want to add on something with those specific treatments, you can follow your personal preference. But I do want to say that some people would like to just take ginger and not take anything else. That's not wise to do.
Right, I see. Dr. Kim, as now we prepare to, of course, usher in Chuseok this year, we've heard health authorities highlight the importance of testing, especially before visiting elderly relatives. And that being said, what are some symptoms that should raise alarm bells, symptoms that tell us that we should go and get a PCR test?
Well, the reason why we are actually talking about some elderly people is that they are actually vulnerable, even after some multiple just vaccination. So the people who are actually visiting just elderly, just the parents, actually maybe we can get some precautions. Like you said, maybe just testing before just visiting our just elderly people, and also as I told earlier, just maybe vaccination, like at least 1 or 2 weeks before just visiting our just parents, might be very just effective against just preventing just any potential just COVID-19. And then for the symptoms, well, the COVID-19 symptoms is kind of maybe just early symptom is it's not really just easy to distinguish it from the other some common cold symptoms. And now this is also season for some allergies like sneezing and a little bit just a fever and then some cough and sore throat. Maybe a little bit just difficult to just distinguish from other symptoms from the allergy and also common cold. But I think if the people are some vulnerable people, then maybe once they feel such kind of symptoms, I would recommend to just getting just tested for the COVID-19.
Right, just to be safe then.
Sure.
Professor Kim, back on the topic of tallies, the number of COVID-19 patients in critical care has been hovering on and slightly below 500 as of today. Could you give us some perspective on this particular figure? I mean, how does it compare to figures for people in critical conditions with other diseases?
Well, before COVID-19, the ICU beds were already overloaded, crowded, and I was thinking that compared to our population, ICU beds are not so enough. We didn't have enough beds for critical patients already. And COVID-19 put a big burden on that trouble. So as people live longer and they live with conditions, underlying conditions, so that makes more people being in a critical situation. And Korea was lucky not to experience a huge trouble as United States or UK or some other countries experienced. Yeah, we didn't go through that kind of thing, but nobody knows for the future. So right now, the critical cases are declining, and I think it will continue to decline, and it will be in a manageable situation. But if a new variant emerges, or if a new kind of infection like COVID-19 or even MERS or something serious happens, we are not that ready to deal with that kind of a situation. So I wish that the health authorities understand that we need to empower the medical personnel and facility to deal with this kind of situation in the future. So yeah, you don't have to worry about this right now, but it's kind of a lesson, and we have to learn from the lesson, and I think that's the way we should go.
Right, we need to be better prepared for the future then.
Yes.
Dr. Kim, some concern has been raised about the possibility now of a twindemic this year. Do you share the sentiment?
Well, that word, the twindemic, actually occurred also just almost 2 years ago right now. That time, the people were concerned about twindemic of COVID-19 and also just the flu. And then last year also, there have been a couple of just occasions that, since the people are somehow just get used to just wearing just masks, some twindemic concern was, well, we actually did not suffer much about the some twindemic just cases. But then there are some small cases of twindemic, for example, caused by COVID-19 and respiratory syncytial virus infection. And then this is some human case of such a double just infection, and also there are some animal studies just a double just infection by the SARS-CoV-2 and also influenza viruses. So the common outcome from those observation is that maybe if a person is maybe just infected by two viruses, very different viruses at the same time, maybe the symptoms got just worse and then maybe some exacerbated the situation. So that what we actually suggested whether if the vaccines are available. Well, in this case, we are having the very effective vaccines against the COVID-19 and also just the influenza viruses. So that maybe just the vaccination, maybe the best way to can just the cope with the potential twindemic. Right
so,
now.
Dr. Kim, essentially you are advising people to get both the flu vaccine and, if they haven't already, the COVID-19 vaccine as well.
Yeah, as far as I know, there's no just a specific just intervals in between just those two vaccines. Some people say maybe just getting just the vaccine at the same time may not cause any problem, but just in case maybe 3 or 4 weeks or just at least a couple of weeks apart between the two vaccines might be just advisable.
Right. Professor Kim, now beyond COVID-19, actually, beyond that, I have a question about an outbreak of tomato flu, actually, among children in India, and it's raising quite a bit of alarm bells across the world. Could you tell us a bit more about the situation?
Yeah, it's very new for Koreans. We never heard about it, but it was there, endemic in an area, Kerala in India. The course is relatively mild, but at the beginning, we thought that it might be an after effect of chikungunya or dengue fever. But now we think it's not that kind of thing, and we think it's kind of a new pathogen, not yet understood yet. The symptoms are fever, fatigue, pain, and typically they have a skin rash resembling a tomato. And sometimes they have a joint pain, and sometimes they have gastrointestinal symptoms such as vomiting, abdominal pain, or diarrhea. If I compare with the disease we have in Korea, I think the hand, foot, mouth disease is the most similar thing, but they don't know what's the cause of this right now. Anyway, we have to be vigilant for this kind of infectious disease because we have a lot of communications globally. So, every time if there's a new variant emerge from COVID-19, we have it. So we should be vigilant, but it's not a life-threatening situation. It's not a totally new disease such as COVID-19, but prevention is the best choice, and I think transmission is very similar to other kinds of enterovirus. So if we keep on our personal hygiene, I don't think it's a big threat for Korea right now.
And staying with the tomato flu, do we have a vaccine or treatment specifically for this particular flu?
Not yet. We don't know the pathogen yet, so we don't have the vaccination.
Right, I see. Dr. Kim, staying with viral diseases, I understand that this may be a tough question, but generally speaking, how can we better prevent ourselves from such diseases?
Well, there are tons of very different kind of viruses, but mostly but do not harm us. They somehow very peacefully coexist with us. They sort of just the parasite. But some actually cause very severe disease. So for some prevention against some potential viral disease, we have to think about their transmission route. Some viruses use some respiratory transmission like COVID-19 and then the flu, and others are oral fecal route, and others are insect or tick biting, and then some contact transmission, and also transfusion. So when we actually consider very different kinds of the transmission route, we can actually deal with that viral infection just using our just common sense. The first and common sense, and then maybe just the first one, then we can actually defend ourselves from such a viral disease. If the vaccine is available, we can get vaccinated, and then we use some common hygiene like washing hands is very basic things. And then if this caused by some insect biting or things like that, we can use a repellent. And also we can actually wear masks, where some winter season, where so many respiratory viruses are just hanging around or everywhere. And so using this kind of a common sense is actually just the best way to prevent viral disease. And then also we cannot actually prevent 100%, but we can actually minimize the risk of just exposing and then being transmitted by these viral just pathogens.
Right, and this, Professor Kim, is an impromptu question, but Dr. Kim just spoke about masks, and quite recently the state of New York has lifted the mask mandate on public transportation. What are your prospects with regard to the fate of masks here in South Korea? When can we take them off? Can we ever take them off?
Well, I think if there's a guarantee that there's no more new variant emerging from COVID-19, I think that will be possible. But I'm sorry that I cannot guarantee. I think nobody can guarantee about that situation. So to be vigilant, to prevent something, I mean, I would think that mask wearing is still needed for public transportation. For elderly people, underlying conditions, they should wear a mask, even though the government will lift out mask wearing.
Right. And Dr. Kim, you spoke about that, is the importance of vaccination. Mm-hmm. Where do we stand on that front right now here in South Korea? I understand we have continuous efforts to further develop treatments as well as vaccines. What is the current status?
Well, we know the domestic companies like the SK Biosciences, and they developed and they started to distribute the sort of just domestic vaccines. But that vaccine is not just updated against the new variant, including Omicron, but then based on the many just experiences and some clinical data we actually obtained so far, those vaccines still just have some good effect. Well, maybe especially some cell-mediated immunity still retains pretty just a good just a preventive just a role, but also just some antibody generated by the vaccines will have just a good just protection levels against even just the variant.
Right. In the time being, we need to wash our hands, watch our distance, and wear our face masks then, as Professor Kim has said. And we also need to avoid confined spaces, crowded spaces, and close contact spaces.
Correct.
Right. Professor Kim, have a happy Chuseok. Dr. Kim as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Happy Chuseok.
Some 60% of the country's population, that would be over 30 million people, are expected to hit the road this Chuseok, which starts tomorrow, that is Friday. Accordingly, highway toll fees will be lifted during the 4-day harvest holiday. Korea Express Corporation believes some 5.4 million cars will be on the highways daily, up almost 13.5% on year. Also, during the Chuseok holiday, a road trip from Seoul to Daejeon is expected to take around 6 hours, roughly double the normal travel time, while driving from Seoul to Busan may take 10 hours and to Gyeongju 9 hours. Also, ahead of the Chuseok holiday, firefighters here are actively seeking to raise better awareness about fire prevention and the possible response in the event of a mishap. All this because fires are reportedly quite prevalent during these harvest festivities. Our colleague Shin Yeon reports.
Chuseok is a busy time for firefighters. With more people cooking, the chance of fires increases. Over the past 5 years, 2,299 fires were reported during the holiday. Roughly half were caused by carelessness. To make sure everyone has a safe holiday, firefighters around the country, including those in Pohang County of Jeollabuk-do Province, have been holding a fire safety campaign called Good Day to Be Safe. One day a month, the firefighters visit places vulnerable to a fire, like traditional markets, to inspect facilities and teach people what to look out for. But ahead of Chuseok, they're doing these visits more regularly.
We want people to enjoy their holidays. In order for them to do so, they need to know what could cause a fire beforehand.
One way to teach that is by distributing checklists. The checklist asks whether the building has a fire extinguisher at hand and if people know how to use it. It checks whether people are safely using their electrical appliances and keeping extension cords untangled and away from water. It also reminds people to regularly ventilate their homes and check if their gas leak alarm is working. Also, it reminds people to stay by the stove at all times when cooking. As part of the campaign, firefighters also inspect the market's electricity and fire prevention facilities and teach people how to properly use a fire extinguisher.
I learned so much, all thanks to our firefighters.
As these firefighters said, in order to have a happy Chuseok, safety should come first. Shin Yeon, Arirang News.
And Chuseok celebrations are also marked with the sharing of gifts among family and friends. Well, our Lee says inflation this year has made affordable presents with eco-friendly packaging quite popular. To take a look.
Preparing holiday gifts is usually an exciting exercise, but is it still the case at a time when people are feeling the effects of high inflation?
I wanted to buy a fruit gift set for my family this Chuseok, but prices are higher than last year. It's quite a burden for me, so I bought smaller sets this year.
Up until the Seollal holiday earlier this year, when social distancing rules were still being enforced, many looked at sending expensive gifts to their families to make up for not being able to visit in person. But now, with inflation sky high, people are on the lookout for more cost-effective presents for this autumn holiday.
This Chuseok gift set cost 27,000 Korean won, or around $20 US. With consumer prices soaring recently, gift sets like this one, which are more cost-effective, are seeing a dramatic increase in sales. In fact, one major retail company says that 90% of the gifts reserved for this Chuseok holiday were gifts that cost less than $70 US.
The pre-purchase rate for gifts also saw a rapid rise this holiday, as buying early allows customers to avail of additional discounts of 30 to 40%. And data from major retail markets on the pre-purchase rate rise shows just how important saving money is for customers this year. Following the trend, these retailers say that they have made more lower-priced gift sets available than usual, at prices below 50,000 Korean won, or around $36. But prices are not the only change to holiday gift sets this year, as sellers aim to cut waste with eco-friendly packaging. At some retail stores, beef gift sets now come in reusable cold storage bags. Smaller boxes, simple packaging, and fewer plastic lids and containers can also be found as well. One food company says that by replacing plastic packages with eco-friendly paper, they were able to reduce plastic use by 470 tons.
The number of eco-friendly consumers is rising every year, especially among Generation MZs. They tend to value sustainable growth, so our company decided to reduce plastic packaging in order to meet consumers' needs.
With concerns rising over the amount of waste generated over the 3 years of the pandemic due to an increase in online shopping and food delivery, more companies are doing their part to protect the environment this Chuseok holiday. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
And the government is poised to expand its spending on vulnerable groups by over 13% in the year 2023 to ease their cost of living. Intentions this end were shared by Finance Minister Chuseok during a relevant meeting on Thursday. The planned budget spending for next year will see almost $54 billion earmarked for vulnerable groups, including the low-income bracket, the disabled, and the elderly. The government also plans to streamline efforts to help South Korean startups go global. Some 410 promising startups will be selected and supported. Also, the visa system for entrepreneurs will be enhanced to attract more global talent into the country. Over at the Parliament, 2 laws were passed earlier on Wednesday, one to ease the tax burden on single homeowners and the other to address the tariff burden on local importers. Our National Assembly correspondent Lee Kyung-eun reports.
South Korea levies its comprehensive real estate holding tax on people who possess properties of high value. But under a new law passed on Wednesday, those who temporarily hold 2 residential properties by default won't need to pay excessive taxes because they'll be considered as single homeowners. This includes people who've moved into a new house but haven't sold their old one yet, and those who've inherited a house. Their tax rate will go down by half by up to 3%. Meanwhile, for those who've owned the same single property for over 5 years or age 60 or older, their tax payment will be postponed until they sell. The 2 measures will benefit some 180,000 people who are among those subject to taxation due to soaring home prices and tax rate hikes put in place under the previous administration. The ruling People Power Party has been pushing for the law as part of a broader effort to back the Yoon Suk-yeol administration's key policy of revising the taxation scheme, and the rival Democratic Party got on board, finding common cause with the PPP in reducing the tax burden on ordinary people. But only partially leaving the 2 parties at odds over the PPP's push to expand the scope of special tax deductions and raise the tax base, which the DP consider as something that only benefit the wealthy. They aim to come to a compromise by September 27th. Meanwhile, with the value of the US dollar soaring against the Korean won, increasing the burden on domestic companies importing goods from overseas, Parliament also passed a law to apply the basic exchange rate for the tariffs on imported goods instead of the slightly higher sales rate like now. Yoon, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In Europe, the EU looks set to impose a price cap on Russian gas supplies. In an attempt to make it harder for Russia to finance its war in Ukraine, the EU will move forward with a plan to cap the price of Russian gas. This is according to European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen on Wednesday. Russian President Vladimir Putin has responded, however, by saying that a price cap will see Moscow halt all supplies. Russia normally provides 40% of Europe's gas and 30% of its oil. The move comes as energy costs in Europe have soared owing to a reduction of gas supply being sent by Russia. European leaders have accused Russia of weaponizing its gas supplies amid Western-led sanctions against Moscow. The planned gas price cap aims to stop Russia from further generating massive revenues on the back of surging fuel costs, while also making energy bills more affordable for EU consumers. In Vietnam, a large fire at a karaoke bar has left dozens dead. Vietnamese media have reported that at least 32 were killed and 11 injured in a fire at a three-story building near Ho Chi Minh City on late Tuesday night. The fire started on the second floor before rapidly moving up to the third floor, where flammable material fueled the blaze. The cause of the fire is still being investigated. An official said that roughly 60 people were in the building at the time of the start of the fire. This marks the most deadly blaze in a series of similar incidents that have fueled concerns over safety standards. In August, 3 firefighters were killed at another karaoke bar in Hanoi. In a resumption of tradition, the official portraits of former US President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama have finally been unveiled in the White House. The Obamas attended the event on Wednesday in the building's East Room, which was also attended by current US President Joe Biden. Previously, it was tradition for a new president to invite their predecessor back to the White House in their first term to unveil their official portrait. However, the normally bipartisan tradition was broken under former US President Donald Trump, who refused to host the Obamas, though no official reason was given at the time. It is still unclear whether Biden will invite Trump to unveil his own official portrait. And finally, according to a study published by Nature on Wednesday, an ancient human skeleton has revealed the oldest known case of surgical amputation. It follows the discovery of a 31,000-year-old skeleton of a youth on Indonesia's Borneo Island. Although the skeleton is mostly intact, it is missing the lower section of its left leg, with researchers saying that the limb was not lost in an accident. Normally, missing limbs show evidence of a crushing fracture or an infection, but in this case, the remaining leg had a clean cut that healed. Further evidence shows the person lived another 6 to 9 years after the procedure. Until now, the oldest known example of a surgery of this kind was dated at some 7,000 years ago. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good Thursday afternoon. It was rather cooler in the morning, but now it's getting hotter. Seoul topping off at 29 degrees and the very same in Daegu. And that is even higher than yesterday. So gaps in readings are as high as the mid-teens in some regions. And that is a sure sign that we're well into autumn. And checking today's high temperatures, it's almost 15 degrees higher than today's lows. When we're going through the change of the seasons, it's much easier to catch a cold. So stay warm and hydrated. And try to bask in the nice warm sunshine, which is known to have plenty of vitamin D. But watch out for the UV index. It's very high all over the country. So it's a great idea to bring your parasol or wide brim hat. And also, be mindful of high ozone levels during peak hours if you're out and about. And overall, it's going to be sunny this weekend, well, partly cloudy at times. But we'll be able to see the full moon breaking through the clouds, so you'll be able to make a wish on the day of Chuseok. Enjoy your holiday and stay safe. And let's take a look at the worldwide weather conditions.
On that note, we say goodbye for this week as we look forward to a long weekend to commemorate this year's Chuseok celebrations. Do have a happy holiday with family and friends. See you next Tuesday.